The warm spring breeze carried the scent of apple blossoms through the open church window, as Tabitha Jones stood trembling in the vestibule, her white wedding gown a stark contrast to the growing darkness in her heart. The clock had struck 3, and William Carver was nowhere to be found. "He ain't coming, Miss Jones," whispered Alina, her maid of honor, as sympathetic murmurs rippled through the crowded church. "Sheriff just found his horse at the train station." Tabitha felt the blood drain from her face. The bouquet of white roses slipped from her fingers, petals scattering across the polished wooden floor like fallen snowflakes. William had abandoned her on what was supposed to be the happiest day of her life. 4 years of courtship, of planning their future in Dillon, Montana, evaporated in an instant. "I can't go in there," Tabitha whispered, her voice barely audible. "I can't face them." Alina squeezed her hand. "You're stronger than you know, Tabby." Gathering what little dignity remained, Tabitha straightened her shoulders and stepped into the church. The crowd fell silent as she walked not down the aisle toward matrimony, but across it toward the side door. She kept her head high, refusing to let a single tear fall until she was out of sight. As she pushed through the door into the blinding sunlight, she collided with a solid chest. Strong hands steadied her shoulders, and she looked up into the most startling blue eyes she'd ever seen. "Whoa there, miss," the stranger said, his voice deep and melodious. "You all right?" He was tall, with sun-bronzed skin and dark hair that curled beneath his Stetson. His clothes were trail-worn but clean, marking him as a working cowboy rather than a town dweller. "I'm fine," she lied, trying to step around him. "Begging your pardon, madam, but you don't look fine." His eyes took in her wedding dress, the missing bouquet, and the expression of barely contained anguish on her face. Understanding dawned in his gaze. "Seems to me someone's made the biggest mistake of his life today." "Please, I need to pass," she insisted, mortification burning her cheeks. He stepped aside with a respectful nod. "Name's Zachary Vance, madam, and if you don't mind me saying, his loss might just be my blessing." Tabitha hurried past him without responding, but his words echoed in her mind as she fled down the street, ignoring the stares of townspeople and the whispers that followed in her wake. She ran until her lungs burned, finally collapsing on a bench at the edge of town, overlooking the valley that stretched toward the distant mountains. Only then did she allow the tears to come, sobbing until her throat was raw and her eyes swollen. "Miss," came a familiar voice. She looked up to find Zachary Vance standing a respectful distance away, leading his horse. He held out a clean handkerchief. "I don't need your pity," she said, though she accepted the offering. "No, madam, I expect you don't." He remained standing, not presuming to join her. But everyone needs a friend on their darkest days. Something about his quiet strength calmed her. "You make a habit of following distraught women, Mr. Vance." A smile tugged at his lips. "Only the ones wearing wedding dresses who look like they might need an escort home. Streets aren't always kind to a lady alone." She dabbed at her eyes. "I don't even know where home is anymore. I can't go back to my parents' house and face them, not tonight." "You got other family nearby." "My aunt has a boarding house on Elm Street." He nodded. "I'll see you safely there if you'll allow it." Tabitha considered him more carefully. His stance was relaxed but alert, hands calloused from honest work. Despite her current opinion of men, she found nothing threatening in his demeanor. "Why would you help a stranger?" she asked. "Because my mama raised me right." He smiled, revealing a dimple in his left cheek. "And because sometimes folks just need a bit of kindness when the world turns cruel." She rose from the bench, suddenly conscious of her disheveled appearance. "I'm Tabitha Jones." "Pleasure to meet you properly, Miss Jones, though I wish it were under happier circumstances." He tipped his hat. "May I walk you to your aunt's?" "You may," she said, finding unexpected comfort in his presence. They walked in companionable silence through town, Zachary leading his horse and positioning himself between Tabitha and the curious stares of passers-by. When they reached the boarding house, he stopped at the gate. "I hope tomorrow brings you easier breaths, Miss Jones." "Thank you, Mr. Vance." She hesitated. "Are you staying in town?" "Just arrived. Looking for work, actually." "What kind of work? Anything honest? I've cowboyed most of my life, but I'm handy with tools and good with horses." Tabitha nodded thoughtfully. "My father owns the mercantile. He mentioned needing help with deliveries and stock. I'd be obliged for the recommendation. It's the least I can do." She managed a small smile. "Good evening, Mr. Vance." As she turned to enter the boarding house, he called after her softly, "Miss Jones." "For what it's worth, any man fool enough to leave you at the altar doesn't deserve a second thought." With those words hanging in the air between them, he tipped his hat once more and led his horse toward the livery stable. Aunt Meredith welcomed Tabitha with open arms and no questions, offering her a room and privacy to nurse her wounded heart. Alone in the small bedroom, Tabitha removed her wedding dress with trembling fingers, folding it carefully before tucking it away in the wardrobe. She would decide its fate another day. For now, she changed into a simple nightgown and sat by the window, watching darkness settle over Dylan. William's betrayal stung like salt in an open wound. They had met when she was 19, fresh from finishing school back east and eager to help her father with the bookkeeping at the mercantile. William, son of the town banker, had courted her with poetry and promises. She had believed his declarations of undying love, had planned their life together in the fine house his father had given them as an engagement present. Now that future was gone, replaced with uncertainty and the weight of public humiliation. Tomorrow, she would have to face the town, the pitying looks, the hushed conversations that would stop when she entered a room. But as she finally drifted off to sleep, it wasn't William's face she saw in her mind, but the kind blue eyes of a stranger who had offered comfort when she needed it most. Morning arrived with golden sunlight and the scent of fresh coffee. Tabitha dressed in a simple blue skirt and white blouse, steeling herself for the day ahead. She found Aunt Meredith in the kitchen, already bustling about serving breakfast to her boarders. "There you are, dear," Meredith said warmly. "Your father stopped by earlier. He's worried about you." Tabitha sighed. "I'll go see him at the store. Better to face things head on." "That's my brave girl." Meredith squeezed her hand. "Your mother wanted to come, but I told her to give you space." "She means well, but she'll have a dozen suggestions about what I should have done differently," Tabitha finished with a rueful smile. "Thank you, Aunt Mary." After breakfast, Tabitha walked the 3 blocks to Jones' mercantile, keeping her head high despite the whispers that followed her. The store bell jingled as she entered, and her father looked up from the ledger he was reviewing. "Tabby," Daniel Jones said, coming around the counter to embrace his daughter. "How are you holding up?" "I'm managing," she replied, returning his hug. "Is Mother very upset?" "More angry than upset. She's currently organizing the return of wedding gifts." He studied her face. "You know you can come home anytime." "I know, but I need some distance right now." She straightened her shoulders. "I want to work, Pa. Keep busy." Daniel nodded in understanding. "The books need balancing, and there's a shipment arriving on the afternoon train." "Perfect." She removed her bonnet and rolled up her sleeves, grateful for meaningful tasks to occupy her mind. By midday, the ledgers were up to date, and Tabitha had helped several customers without crumbling under their sympathetic glances. She was arranging a display of canned goods when the bell above the door jingled again. "Afternoon, sir," came a familiar voice. "I'm looking for Mr. Jones." Tabitha turned to see Zachary Vance standing just inside the door, hat in hand. He was freshly shaven, his dark hair still damp, wearing a clean shirt though his denims and boots showed the wear of trail life. "That would be me," her father replied from behind the counter. "What can I help you with?" Name's Zachary Vance. "I'm looking for work, and Miss Jones mentioned you might be hiring." Daniel glanced at his daughter with raised eyebrows. "Did she now?" Tabitha stepped forward. "Mr. Vance was kind enough to escort me to Aunt Mary's yesterday when I was indisposed." Understanding flickered in her father's eyes. "I see. Well, Mr. Vance, what experience do you have?" "I've worked cattle most of my life, sir. Last 5 years with the Bar S Ranch near Helena. Good with horses, can handle a team, not afraid of hard work, and I'm honest." "Why'd you leave the Bar S?" "Owner died, and his son decided to sell. New company brought in their own men." Zachary's gaze was steady. "I can provide references if you need them." Daniel considered him thoughtfully. "I do need someone to handle deliveries and help with the heavy stock. It's not cowboy work. I'm not above any honest labor, sir. Pays $3 a day with half-day Saturdays." Zachary nodded. "That's fair. Can you start this afternoon? Train's bringing in a shipment at 3. "Yes, sir, I can." Daniel extended his hand. "Welcome aboard, Mr. Vance. Tabitha will show you the ropes." As her father returned to helping a customer, Zachary turned to Tabitha with a smile. "Mighty grateful for the opportunity, Miss Jones." "Consider us even, Mr. Vance," she replied, trying to ignore the flutter in her stomach when their eyes met. "I'll show you the storeroom and explain the delivery routes." For the next hour, Tabitha guided Zachary through the inventory system, showing him where various items were stored and explaining which local businesses received regular deliveries. He proved a quick study, asking intelligent questions and committing details to memory. "Most households order staples once a month," she explained as they walked between shelves stacked with flour, sugar, and coffee. "We deliver to outlying farms on a rotation. Mondays for the North Valley, Wednesdays for the East, and Fridays for the South." "What about the boarding houses and hotel?" "Those get weekly deliveries, usually Tuesdays and Thursdays." He nodded, absorbing the information. "And the wagon, we have too. The small one for in-town deliveries and the larger one for farm routes." She paused, studying him. "Where are you staying, by the way?" "Found a room at Mrs. Peterson's boarding house for now. That's just down the street from my aunt's place." A smile touched his lips. "So it is." The moment stretched between them until the store bell jangled, breaking the spell. Tabitha turned to see William's mother, Margaret Carver, entering the store. The older woman stopped short when she spotted Tabitha, her expression a complicated mixture of embarrassment and pity. "Tabitha, dear," she began, wringing her gloved hands. I've been trying to find you." Tabitha felt her cheeks burn as every customer in the store turned to watch the exchange. "Mrs. Carver, this isn't the place. I need to apologize for my son's despicable behavior," Margaret pressed on, her voice wavering. "What William did was unforgivable." "Have you heard from him?" Tabitha asked despite herself. Margaret shook her head. "Only a telegram from Denver saying he's headed to California. He's taken a considerable sum from his accounts." She stepped closer, lowering her voice. "Tabitha, there's something else you should know. William, he hasn't been honest with you. The bank has been having troubles. My husband has been covering it up, but—" Zachary cleared his throat softly. "Miss Jones, I believe your father needs help with a customer." Grateful for the interruption, Tabitha nodded. "If you'll excuse me, Mrs. Carver, we can speak another time." She escaped to the front of the store, where her father gave her a questioning look. There was no customer needing assistance, but he didn't comment on the white lie. "Why don't you take some air?" he suggested gently. I can show Mr. Vance how to handle the incoming shipment." Tabitha nodded gratefully and slipped out the back door into the alley, drawing deep breaths to calm her racing heart. Moments later, the door opened again, and Zachary stepped out. "I'm sorry if I overstepped," he said. "You looked like you needed rescuing." "You have a habit of coming to my aid, Mr. Vance." She leaned against the wall, suddenly exhausted. "It seems William's betrayal runs deeper than I knew." Zachary stood beside her, offering silent support. "Some men don't deserve the trust placed in them. And you?" she asked, turning to study his profile. "Are you worthy of trust?" His blue eyes met hers steadily. "I try to be. I've made my share of mistakes, but I've never intentionally broken a promise or betrayed a confidence." "Why did you really come to Dillon?" "There are plenty of ranches that would hire an experienced cowhand." He was quiet for a moment. "Truth is, I've been drifting since the bar S sold. Thought it might be time to put down some roots, learn a different trade. Cowboying's a young man's game, and at 32, I've started thinking about what comes next." "And what does come next in your vision of the future?" "A home. Maybe a family someday." He shrugged, a hint of vulnerability in the gesture. "Never had much of either growing up." Before Tabitha could respond, her father called from inside, announcing the train's arrival. Zachary straightened, settling his hat back on his head. "Best get to work. Thank you again for the recommendation, Miss Jones." "Call me Tabitha," she said impulsively, "if we're to be working together." A smile warmed his eyes. "Zachary, then." Over the following weeks, Zachary proved himself an invaluable asset to Jones Mercantile. He handled deliveries efficiently, suggested improvements to the storage system, and won over customers with his respectful manner and ready smile. Daniel Jones came to rely on him, particularly for the longer delivery routes to outlying farms. For Tabitha, his steady presence was both comforting and unsettling. She found herself looking forward to their conversations as they worked, discovering a depth to him that belied his humble cowboy demeanor. He was well-read despite limited formal education, having taught himself from books borrowed during long winters on remote ranches. He spoke Spanish fluently, the result of years working alongside Mexican vaqueros. And he told stories that made her laugh, a welcome balm to her wounded spirit. As May turned to June, the scandal of her abandoned wedding gradually faded from town gossip, replaced by news of the railroad expansion and concerns about the dry summer ahead. Tabitha moved back to her parents' home, reclaiming her independence bit by bit, though the house William's father had given them stood empty on the edge of town, a reminder of what might have been. On a warm Tuesday afternoon, Tabitha was finalizing the weekly order for the Grand Hotel when Zachary returned from his deliveries earlier than expected. "You're back already?" she asked, surprised. "Made good time." He removed his hat, running a hand through hair that had grown longer since his arrival in Dillon. "Actually, I wanted to ask you something." "Yes." He shifted slightly, an uncharacteristic nervousness in his stance. "The town's hosting that summer social on Saturday. I was wondering if you might consider attending. With me." Tabitha's breath caught. This was the first social invitation she'd received since the wedding debacle. "Are you asking to court me, Zachary Vance?" "I'm asking for the honor of your company at a dance," he replied with a small smile. "But I won't deny I've grown fond of you, Tabitha Jones." Heat crept into her cheeks. "People will talk. People always talk. Question is, do you care what they say?" She considered his question seriously. 2 months ago, she had been devastated by public humiliation. Now, she found herself caring less about the opinions of others and more about her own happiness. "I'd be pleased to attend with you," she said finally. His smile brightened his entire face. "I'll call for you at 6 then." As Zachary returned to unloading the wagon, Tabitha tried to sort through her conflicted emotions. She was attracted to him, certainly. He was handsome in a rugged way that William, with his banker's soft hands and tailored suits, had never been. But it was more than physical attraction. Zachary's quiet strength and integrity drew her to him, even as her recent heartbreak made her wary of trusting again. When Saturday arrived, Tabitha spent more time than usual preparing for the social. She chose a pale yellow dress that complemented her brown hair and hazel eyes, adding a touch of rouge to her cheeks and a spritz of lavender water at her wrists. Her mother watched her preparations with a mixture of concern and approval. "He seems a fine man," Eliza Jones said as she helped pin Tabitha's hair. "Your father speaks highly of him." "He is," Tabitha replied, meeting her mother's gaze in the mirror, "but I'm not ready to give my heart away again so soon." "No one says you must." Eliza placed a gentle hand on her daughter's shoulder. "Just don't close yourself off to possibilities because one foolish man couldn't see your worth." At precisely 6 o'clock, Zachary arrived at the Jones residence. He wore a clean white shirt, dark vest, and new denims, his boots polished to a shine. He'd trimmed his hair and beard, and when Tabitha appeared in the parlor, the admiration in his eyes made her pulse quicken. "You look beautiful," he said simply. "Thank you." She accepted the small bouquet of wildflowers he offered. "These are lovely." Daniel Jones cleared his throat from his position by the fireplace. "Have her home by 10, Vance." "Yes, sir. You have my word." The town hall had been transformed with paper lanterns and bouquets of summer flowers. A four-piece band played lively tunes as couples spun around the dance floor. When Tabitha entered on Zachary's arm, she felt the weight of curious glances, but they seemed less intrusive than she'd feared. "Would you care to dance?" Zachary asked as the band struck up a waltz. "I would," she replied, allowing him to lead her onto the floor. His hand was warm at her waist, strong and sure as he guided her through the steps. He danced better than she had expected, moving with natural grace despite his cowboy background. "You're full of surprises," she commented. "Where did you learn to waltz?" A wistful smile touched his lips. "My mother taught me before she passed, said every man should know how to treat a lady on a dance floor no matter his station in life." "She sounds like a wise woman." She was. His eyes held hers. "She would have liked you, I think." As the evening progressed, Tabitha found herself relaxing in Zachary's company, laughing at his observations and enjoying the simple pleasure of being admired without pressure or expectation. They shared a cup of punch beneath a maple tree in the town square, watching fireflies rise from the grass as dusk deepened. "Thank you for coming tonight," he said. "I know it couldn't have been easy facing everyone." "Actually, it was easier than I expected." She studied his profile in the lantern light. "You make me feel safe." He turned to her, something serious in his gaze. "I would never hurt you, Tabitha, not willingly. I believe you." And she realized with surprise that she did. The moment was interrupted by the arrival of George Carver, William's father and the town banker. His face was flushed with drink, his usual polished appearance disheveled. "Well, isn't this cozy?" he said, his words slightly slurred. "Didn't take you long to find a replacement, did it, Tabitha?" Zachary stepped slightly in front of her. "Mr. Carver, I think you've had enough for one evening." The banker's bloodshot eyes narrowed. "Who are you to tell me anything, cowboy? Do you know who I am in this town? A man who's embarrassing himself in public," Zachary replied evenly. "And insulting a lady who deserves better." Carver's face darkened. "My son was too good for her anyway. Family of shopkeepers playing at respectability." Tabitha felt anger rise in her chest. "Your son was a coward who ran away rather than face his responsibilities." "And from what I hear, The bank isn't doing so well under your management, Mr. Carver." A flash of panic crossed the banker's face before it contorted with rage. He lunged forward, but Zachary intercepted him, grasping his arm firmly. "That's enough," Zachary said, his voice low but commanding. "Go home before you say something you can't take back." For a tense moment, it seemed Carver might throw a punch. Then Sheriff Miller appeared at his side. "Everything all right here?" the lawman asked, though his expression made it clear he'd witnessed the exchange. "Mr. Carver was just leaving," Zachary replied, releasing the banker's arm. Carver straightened his jacket, glaring at them. "This isn't over," he muttered before allowing the sheriff to escort him away. When they were alone again, Tabitha released a shaky breath. "I'm sorry about that." "Don't be." Zachary took her hand gently. "You stood your ground with dignity. That takes courage. I think I'm ready to go home now." He nodded in understanding. "I'll walk you back." The night air had cooled, and Zachary draped his jacket over Tabitha's shoulders as they strolled through the quiet streets of Dillon. Neither spoke of the confrontation, instead discussing the music at the social and sharing observations about the townspeople they'd met. At her parents' front gate, Tabitha returned his jacket. "I had a wonderful time tonight, despite the interruption." "As did I." He hesitated, then asked, "Would you consider going riding with me tomorrow afternoon? There's a spot by the creek that's right pretty this time of year." The invitation was another step toward courtship, and they both knew it. Tabitha considered, her heart still tender but no longer broken beyond repair. "I'd like that," she said finally. His smile was worth any risk. "I'll come by after church around 2. I'll be ready." He took her hand and pressed a gentle kiss to her knuckles. "Good night, Tabitha." "Good night, Zachary." As promised, Zachary arrived the following afternoon with 2 horses from the livery stable. They rode through sun-dappled meadows toward the creek that wound through the valley east of town. Tabitha wore a practical riding skirt and felt a freedom she hadn't experienced in years, away from the confines of town and the weight of recent events. "How long have you been riding?" Zachary asked as they walked their horses side by side. "Since I was a girl. My grandfather had a small ranch before he sold it and opened the mercantile. I spent summers there until I was 15. You sit a horse well," he observed. "Most town ladies I've known prefer carriages." She laughed. "I'm not most ladies, as you may have noticed." "I've definitely noticed." The warmth in his voice made her cheeks flush. They reached a bend in the creek where ancient cottonwoods provided shade. Zachary helped her dismount, his hands strong and sure at her waist. He spread a blanket on the grassy bank and unpacked a simple picnic of bread, cheese, and early summer berries. "It's beautiful here," Tabitha said, removing her hat and tilting her face to catch dappled sunlight through the leaves. "How did you find it?" "Delivered supplies to the Henderson farm last week. The eldest boy showed me this spot." He sat beside her, leaving respectful space between them. "Thought you might appreciate some peace away from prying eyes." "I do." She accepted the tin cup of creek water he offered. "Sometimes I feel like the whole town is waiting for me to either collapse in despair or make another foolish choice." "And what do you want, Tabitha?" His blue eyes were serious as they studied her face. "Not what the town expects, but what your heart desires." The question caught her off guard. For so long, she had defined her wants in relation to others, her parents' expectations, William's preferences, society's approval. "I want to be valued for who I am, not who someone wishes me to be," she said slowly. "I want work that matters, a home that's truly mine, and—" She hesitated, then added softly, "Someday, love that doesn't demand I become smaller to accommodate it." Zachary nodded, understanding in his gaze. "Those seem like worthy desires to me." "And you?" she asked. "What does your heart want, Zachary Vance?" He was quiet for a moment, his gaze drifting to the creek's flowing waters. Roots, a purpose, connection. His eyes returned to hers. I've spent most of my life moving from place to place, always the outsider passing through. I'm tired of temporary. The vulnerability in his admission touched her deeply. Is that why Dylan appeals to you? Partly. A smile tugged at his lips, but I find the company particularly appealing. They spent the afternoon in easy conversation, discovering shared values and complementary differences. Zachary spoke of his nomadic childhood with a father who chased mining opportunities across the West, never striking it rich, but never giving up the dream. Tabitha shared stories of growing up in Dillon, of her year at finishing school in Philadelphia, and her return to Montana when she realized she preferred wide open spaces to crowded city streets. As the sun began its westward descent, they packed up their picnic and mounted their horses for the ride back to town. Zachary reached across the space between them to touch her hand gently. "Thank you for today," he said. "Being with you makes me believe in possibilities I'd nearly given up on." The simple honesty of his words moved her more than elaborate declarations ever could. "I feel the same way," she admitted. That afternoon marked a turning point in their relationship. Over the following weeks, they established a courtship that progressed with thoughtful deliberation rather than impulsive passion. Zachary called on her regularly, joining the Jones family for Sunday dinners and escorting Tabitha to church socials. They rode together on his days off, exploring the countryside around Dillon and sharing pieces of themselves in the safety of open spaces. July brought scorching heat and drought concerns. The creek where they had picnicked dwindled to a trickle, and farmers worried about their crops. At Jones Mercantile, business remained steady as ever, with Zachary taking on more responsibilities as Daniel trusted him with ordering and account management. One sweltering afternoon, as Tabitha was closing the store ledger, the town's telegraph operator burst through the door, his young face flushed with excitement. "Miss Jones," he exclaimed. "Important news. The bank's been shut down by federal examiners. They're saying Mr. Carver's been cooking the books for years." Tabitha exchanged a shocked look with Zachary, who had been stocking shelves nearby. "What about people's savings?" she asked. The boy shook his head. "Nobody knows yet. Sheriffs posted guards, and there's a federal marshal coming on tomorrow's train." As word spread, the town erupted in chaos. Worried depositors gathered outside the bank, demanding answers. By evening, the full story began to emerge. George Carver had been misappropriating funds for years, covering shortfalls with creative bookkeeping and new deposits. When William fled to California, he had taken a substantial amount of the bank's remaining liquid assets. "No wonder he ran," Tabitha said that night as she and Zachary sat on her parents' porch, watching lightning flicker on the distant horizon. "He must have known it was all about to collapse." Zachary took her hand, his thumb tracing gentle circles on her palm. "Are you all right?" She considered the question seriously. "Strangely, yes, I feel, relieved in a way, to know it wasn't about me, that he would have been a disaster even if we had married." "You deserved better," he said simply. "You still do." She turned to study his face in the gathering dusk. "Zachary, why did you really speak to me that day at the church, truthfully?" He met her gaze steadily. "Because I saw something in your eyes that called to me, not just pain but strength underneath it. And yes, I thought you were beautiful, even with tears on your wedding dress. But it was the courage that drew me in. I didn't feel very courageous. That's what makes it real courage, doing what needs doing even when you're scared." He shifted to face her more directly. "Tabitha, I need to tell you something. I've been offered a job." Her heart sank. "You're leaving?" "No," he said quickly. "It's here in Dillon." The Henderson Ranch needs a foreman. Old Jake's retiring and Mr. Henderson approached me yesterday. Relief washed over her. That's wonderful news. It means I'd be leaving the mercantile, though. And I wouldn't want your father to think I'm being ungrateful. Pa will understand. He's always said a man should follow his true calling. She squeezed his hand. Is this what you want? A smile lit his face. It feels right. I'd have a proper place, my own cabin on the property. It's good land and Henderson's fair, but what? His eyes held hers intently. It would mean seeing less of you. The ranch is a 10-mile ride from town. Understanding dawned. Is that all? Zachary Vance, do you think a little distance would change how I feel about you? And how do you feel? He asked, his voice suddenly husky. Instead of answering with words, Tabitha leaned forward and pressed her lips to his. The kiss was gentle at first, a question and an answer combined. When his hand came up to cradle her cheek, the tenderness in his touch nearly undid her. She pulled back slightly, her heart racing. Does that answer your question? She whispered. His eyes had darkened to the color of twilight. I think I need to hear it all the same. I love you, she said, the words feeling both momentous and inevitable. I wasn't looking for it, wasn't ready for it, but here it is anyway. Joy blazed across his features. I love you too, Tabitha Jones. Have since that first day, I think, though I didn't recognize it then. He kissed her again, deeper this time, his arms encircling her waist as hers wound around his neck. The summer storm that had been threatening all evening finally broke, fat raindrops beginning to fall around them, but neither noticed until Daniel Jones cleared his throat from the doorway. Much as we need the rain, he said dryly, I think you'd both better come inside before you're soaked through. They broke apart, Tabitha flushing with embarrassment while Zachary stood respectfully. Sir, I'd like to speak with you if you have a moment, he said. Daniel's eyebrows rose, but he nodded. Studies this way. As the men disappeared inside, Eliza Jones joined her daughter on the porch, watching the rain intensify. I take it things have progressed, she said with a knowing smile. Tabitha couldn't contain her own smile. He loves me, Mother. And I love him. Eliza squeezed her daughter's hand. He's a good man, different from William in all the ways that matter. Do you think Father will approve? Your father approved weeks ago, dear. He was just waiting for you two to figure it out. Inside the study, Zachary stood straight-backed before Daniel Jones, hat in hand. Sir, I've come to ask for your blessing to court your daughter properly, with marriage in mind. Daniel leaned back in his chair, regarding the younger man thoughtfully. You've known each other barely 3 months, Vance. That's not long in the scheme of things. No, sir, it's not. But I know my own mind and heart. I love Tabitha and I believe she feels the same. And this ranch job, how does that factor in? It offers stability, sir. A future I can build on. I'd have my own cabin to start, but Henderson set aside a parcel of land that the foreman can purchase over time. Good bottom land near the creek, enough for a proper house and small herd of my own eventually. Daniel nodded slowly. You've thought this through? Yes, sir. I wouldn't ask if I couldn't provide for her properly. And what of her wishes? Tabitha's not one to be content as just a rancher's wife. She has a keen mind for business. Zachary smiled. That's part of why I love her, sir. I'd never ask her to be less than she is. If she wants to continue working at the mercantile or start something of her own, I'd support that completely. Daniel studied him for a long moment, then stood and extended his hand. You have my blessing, Vance, but the timing is up to Tabitha. Understood, sir, thank you. The two men rejoined the women in the parlor, where Tabitha looked up expectantly. The smile her father gave her was all the confirmation she needed. As the storm raged outside, the four of them sat together, discussing Zachary's new position and possibilities for the future. August arrived with blessed rain that broke the drought and cooled the parched land. Zachary began his new role at the Henderson Ranch, settling into the foreman's cabin and riding into town twice a week to see Tabitha. Far from weakening their bond, the distance seemed to strengthen it, making their time together all the more precious. On a golden Sunday afternoon, Zachary took Tabitha to see the parcel of land Mr. Henderson had promised him. It lay in a protected valley with the creek running along one edge, cottonwoods providing shade and shelter from winter winds. "This would be ours someday," he explained as they walked the boundaries. "Room for a house here near the trees. Garden plot there, catching the morning sun. Pasture beyond for horses and a few cattle of our own." Tabitha could see it in her mind's eye, a sturdy house with wide porches, children playing beneath the trees, the two of them growing old together in this peaceful place. "It's perfect," she said softly. Zachary took both her hands in his. "Tabitha Jones, I know it hasn't been long since you faced heartbreak. I know you might want more time. But I love you with everything I am, and I want to build a life with you." He dropped to one knee, still holding her hands. "Will you marry me?" Joy welled up inside her, bright and certain. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, Zachary Vance, I will marry you." His answering smile was radiant as he rose to his feet, lifting her off the ground in an exuberant embrace. When he set her down, he reached into his pocket and withdrew a small velvet pouch. "It's not fancy," he said, a touch of nervousness in his voice as he opened it to reveal a simple gold band set with a small pearl. "But it was my mother's. She made me promise to give it only to a woman worthy of it." Tears blurred Tabitha's vision as he slipped the ring onto her finger. "It's beautiful. I'll treasure it always." They returned to town that evening to share their news with her parents, who welcomed Zachary into the family with genuine warmth. As word spread through Dillon, Tabitha was touched by the sincere congratulations they received. Even those who had whispered behind their fans about William's abandonment seemed genuinely pleased by her newfound happiness. The young couple decided on a November wedding, giving them time to prepare and allowing Zachary to complete the fall roundup at the Henderson Ranch. Tabitha continued working at the mercantile while planning a simple ceremony at the church, followed by a celebration at the town hall. As summer turned to autumn, news arrived that shook the community once more. William Carver had been arrested in San Francisco, caught trying to flee to Australia with what remained of the embezzled funds. His father had already been sentenced to 10 years in federal prison for his role in the bank fraud. "How do you feel about it?" Zachary asked Tabitha as they sat together on her parents' porch, watching leaves drift down in the October twilight. She considered the question carefully. "Sad in a way. Not for myself, but for the lives they've ruined, all those people who lost their savings, the businesses that suffered." She looked down at her engagement ring, the pearl gleaming softly in the fading light. "But mostly, I feel grateful. Grateful. If William hadn't left me at the altar, I might never have met you." She leaned her head against his shoulder. "His cowardice led me to the bravest man I know." Zachary pressed a kiss to her temple. "His loss truly was my blessing." Their wedding day dawned clear and cold, the first snow of the season dusting the distant mountains. Tabitha dressed in a gown of deep ivory silk, simpler than her previous wedding dress but far more meaningful. Her mother fastened a string of pearls around her neck, and Aunt Meredith tucked sprigs of dried lavender into her upswept hair. "You look radiant," Eliza said, blinking back tears. "Truly happy." "I am," Tabitha replied, her heart full. "This time, I know I'm marrying the right man for the right reasons." The church was filled with friends and neighbors, the pews decorated with evergreen boughs and white ribbons. Zachary waited at the altar, his usual cowboy attire replaced by a new black suit, his expression one of wonder as Tabitha walked toward him on her father's arm. Unlike the last time she had stood in this church in a wedding gown, there was no doubt, no fear, only certainty and joy as she spoke her vows in a clear voice. Zachary's hands were steady as he placed the gold band on her finger to join the engagement ring, and when the minister pronounced them husband and wife, his kiss was a promise sealed before God and community. The celebration afterward was filled with music, laughter, and dancing. Mr. Henderson presented them with a fine pair of matched bay horses as a wedding gift. Daniel and Eliza Jones gave them funds to begin building their home on the ranch land. As the evening drew to a close, Zachary and Tabitha slipped away to the hotel where they would spend their first night as husband and wife before traveling to Helena for a brief honeymoon. In the privacy of their room, Zachary took Tabitha in his arms, his eyes serious as he studied her face. "I'll spend the rest of my life trying to be worthy of your love," he said softly. She placed her palm against his cheek. "You already are. Just by being the man you are honorable, kind, and true." Their kiss deepened, passion building between them as they came together as husband and wife, discovering each other with tenderness and growing urgency. In the aftermath, Tabitha lay in his arms, her head on his chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart. "I never thought I could be this happy," she whispered. His arms tightened around her. "This is just the beginning, Mrs. Vance. The best is yet to come." Spring arrived in a riot of wildflowers, painting the Montana landscape in vibrant hues. On the Henderson Ranch, a new structure stood near the creek, the framework of a house taking shape day by day. Zachary had begun building as soon as the ground thawed, working alongside hired carpenters whenever he could spare time from his foreman duties. Tabitha divided her time between helping at the mercantile 3 days a week and making their temporary home in the foreman's cabin as comfortable as possible. The small space was crowded but cozy, filled with wedding gifts and treasures they'd chosen together. At night, they would sit on the porch, planning their future while watching stars appear in the vast Montana sky. On a warm May afternoon, almost exactly a year after William had abandoned Tabitha at the altar, she sat beneath a cottonwood tree near their half-built house, sketching ideas for the kitchen layout. The sound of hoofbeats made her look up to see Zachary riding toward her, his horse at a canter. Something about his expression made her heart skip. "What is it?" she asked as he dismounted and strode toward her. He dropped to his knees beside her, taking her hands in his. "It's official. Henderson signed over the deed to this parcel, 20 acres, including water rights to the creek." His blue eyes shone with excitement. "It's ours, Tabitha, truly ours now." She threw her arms around his neck, laughing with joy. "Our own land. Oh, Zachary, it's really happening." He pulled back slightly to look at her. "There's more. Henderson's offered to let us run some of our own cattle with his herd. We can start with a dozen head, build from there." "That's wonderful." She couldn't stop smiling. "And I have news too." "What is it?" She placed his hand gently on her still flat stomach. "We're going to have a baby. Come November, around our anniversary." Zachary's expression transformed from surprise to wonder. "A baby? We're going to be parents," she nodded, tears of happiness filling her eyes. "Dr. Mason confirmed it yesterday. I wanted to be sure before I told you." He gathered her close, his own eyes suspiciously bright. "A home, land of our own, and now a child. Tabitha Vance, you've made me the richest man in Montana." "We've built this together," she reminded him, leaning her forehead against his. "Every bit of it." That evening, as they sat on their porch watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of gold and crimson, Tabitha felt a contentment so deep it seemed to touch her very soul. William's abandonment, once the greatest pain she'd known, now seemed like a distant memory, a necessary detour on the path that had led her to true happiness. "Penny for your thoughts," Zachary said, his arm warm around her shoulders. She smiled up at him. "I was thinking about fate and how what seems like our worst moment can sometimes lead us to our best life, like being left at the altar and finding you instead." She nestled closer to his side. "Do you remember what you said to me that day, that his loss was your blessing?" Zachary pressed a kiss to her temple. "Little did I know it would be the greatest blessing of my life." As darkness settled over the Montana landscape, they sat together in comfortable silence, watching the first stars appear. Their house would be finished before the baby came. Their small herd would grow with the years, and the mercantile would continue to thrive under her part-time management. But in that moment, with the promise of their future stretching before them like the endless Montana sky, Tabitha knew that she had already found the greatest treasure life could offer: a love built on respect, understanding, and unwavering commitment. The years proved the strength of that foundation. By their 5th anniversary, the Vance ranch had grown to include 60 head of cattle, a small apple orchard, and a sturdy barn to complement their 2-story home. Their family had expanded as well, with 3-year-old Daniel named for his grandfather, and 1-year-old Rose sleeping in the cradle Zachary had carved with his own hands. Tabitha still worked 2 days a week at the mercantile, now partners with her father rather than just an employee. The town of Dillon had grown with the railroad's expansion, but it maintained its close-knit community spirit. Children played in the streets where William Carver had once walked, his name now little more than a footnote in local history. On the evening of their anniversary, as they stood together on their porch watching the sunset, Zachary wrapped his arms around Tabitha from behind, resting his chin on her shoulder. "Regrets?" he asked softly, a question that had become a tradition between them. She turned in his embrace, her eyes reflecting the golden light. "Not a single one. You." His smile was answer enough as he lowered his lips to hers, their kiss as full of promise as the day they wed. In the distance, their children's laughter mingled with the evening breeze, a sweet harmony to accompany the love story that had begun with an ending and blossomed into a lifetime of beginnings. "Not one," he whispered against her lips. "Every day with you is a blessing I never take for granted." And as the first stars appeared in the darkening sky, they stood together on the land they had made their own, surrounded by the life they had built together, proof that sometimes the greatest love stories begin when we think all hope is lost, and that a single act of kindness on our darkest day can lead to a lifetime of happiness.